Welcome back to Yoga Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Waycott. If you're new here, I've been a yoga teacher for over 14 years, and today I run a completely independent yoga business that doesn't rely on studio classes. I offer pre-registered yoga series in my community, as well as continuing education for yoga teachers who want to refine their skills. Over the years, I've learned a lot about what it takes to run a yoga business that's actually sustainable. And part of my mission is to have real conversations with yoga teachers around the world about what it's actually like to work in the modern yoga industry. That is exactly what Yoga Insider Podcast is here for. Grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's dive into today's episode. All right, welcome back to another episode of Yoga Insider Podcast. I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad to be here as always. Just a couple of notes before we get into today's episode. I have my dog, Waylon, here with me, and I can't guarantee that he isn't going to start barking because there are things being moved around in my backyard right now, and he likes to pretend that he is like a big guard dog, even though he's just like a senior golden retriever. So apologies in advance if Waylon starts doing his really mean, loud bark. Normally, I do these episodes like just all in one take. So what you get is what you get. We don't usually like edit anything out of them. But if he barks like really loud and goes crazy, we'll obviously try to edit that out. So just wanted to like give you a little heads up. Yeah, I'm also drinking like a kombucha today. It's not sponsored, but it had me thinking that like I should get some kind of a drink sponsor for my podcast. And then I'll like drink it. You can watch me drink it on the YouTube video. It's very good. Wild berry flavor. Yeah, I'm just drinking a kombucha because I taught 2 yoga retreats this past week and I have so much kombucha left over. I bought like a whole bunch of drinks because I was supplying food and beverages as part of the retreats, but then everybody ended up just wanting to drink tea and not drinking like the cold drinks. So now I have so many that I need to consume on my own. But yeah, okay. If you are listening to today's podcast on release day, then today is a very special day in Yoga Insider history because today marks exactly 1 year since the trailer episode of Yoga Insider was released into the world. That was Waylon barking in the background. I don't know if you're going to hear this. So anyways, so that means that it has been almost 1 year of podcasting every single week. And I feel like I'm here a year later on the other side of a lot of apprehension and uncertainty that I felt around starting a podcast. This past year has been a year of experimentation. It has been a year of learning a lot of new skills on the fly, just like week by week, kind of as we're going along. And it has been a year of trusting the bigger picture in order to stay consistent with producing episodes every single week and putting out new content every single week. So today, on Yoga Insider's first birthday, we are going on a little walk down memory lane, and I'm going to give you a little behind the scenes of some of the growth that has come from podcasting for an entire year, podcasting every single week for an entire year. I think that today's episode will resonate with a lot of people, not just yoga teachers. I realize that, this podcast is super niche, and a lot of the things that I talk about are like only relevant and applicable to people who teach yoga. But I think that like if you are a creative or if you are anyone who has a dream or an idea that you want to bring to life, but you haven't taken action yet towards making that happen, I think today's episode is going to resonate with you. So I've talked a little bit about some of these things before, but I'm going to kind of like bring it all together in today's episode. The idea for Yoga Insider podcast came to me over 5 years ago. And at the time, I want to say it was closer to 6 years ago. At the time, I was running my own like online yoga subscription platform. So it was like a membership-based platform. And this was like in the midst of the pandemic. And so online yoga was the way to go at the time. And I started kind of getting the idea of like, you know, it'd be really cool to have a podcast because I was actually creating weekly video content at that time and producing new yoga videos every single week for my online subscribers who were paying for my online content. And because I was filming online videos, I was starting to think like, oh, maybe I should like also start a yoga podcast. And that would be kind of cool, you know, to have the other element of things and to be able to talk a little bit more rather than just the videos where I was like just teaching yoga asana. And on my online platform, there was like little tiers or little goals on there. So it was like, okay, if we reach this many subscribers, I'm going to release like a bonus yoga class, or I'm going to do like a live Zoom yoga class and little things like that. And one of the goals on there was like, if I hit a certain number of subscribers, I was going to start a yoga podcast. And what's funny is that I actually hit that number of subscribers, but I didn't start a yoga podcast. So that's kind of interesting. And yeah, I don't know, maybe there's more there to get into, but that's kind of where the idea came from. And so for whatever reason, I mean, I know it was also like, it was a very chaotic time for a lot of us. But for whatever reason, even though I like hit that milestone, I didn't actually start the podcast, even though I could have started it like 6 years ago. So that's kind of like where the initial idea came from and where it started, but it seemed to take a really long time to actually come to fruition. Part of my intention was I had this real desire to share honest conversations with yoga teachers about like what working in the industry is actually like. And a lot of that was inspired by some really incredible conversations that I was having with yoga teachers in 200-hour trainings. It was also coming from conversations that I was having in like peer discussion group type environments. And I just felt like these conversations were taking place behind closed doors, and that you know, there had to be more people out there who wanted to hear about these types of things and about, you know, a lot of the unique struggles and situations that yoga teachers face. And I wanted to be able to share those conversations on a broader scale. And I did have a desire to start to grow my audience beyond borders and beyond my geographical region and hopefully reach, you know, more people around the world. So that's kind of like what the thinking was behind starting the podcast. And so it was definitely something that had been like incubating in my mind for a really, really long time. But there's definitely a few reasons why I didn't like take action towards it right away. And so this time last year, when the trailer for Yoga Insider podcast released, I had just wrapped up a 200-hour yoga teacher training that I was teaching basically by myself the month before. And at that point, when that 200-hour YTT wrapped up, I definitely felt like I needed to take some time to kind of reassess the program and reassess like what I wanted it to look like moving forward. And then as soon as that program wrapped up, I feel like we immediately went into live music and like festival season. So for anyone listening who doesn't know, my husband is a professional musician. He is a music producer, and he is the producer as well of Yoga Insider podcast. And so in our household this time last year, it was like a really busy work season. And that meant that there was like lots of places to be and places to go. And it was definitely like a welcome, lighthearted contrast for me to have kind of like a month of like gigs to go to and to not be running a YTT anymore, like for that month. But also at the same time, I had been working behind the scenes like while I was running that YTT, and then into July last year, starting to create the first episodes for Yoga Insider podcast. And so those first episodes, initially I recorded them as audio only because I've said this before, but I was like, video is just a barrier for me. It's one more thing to think about, one more thing to learn. Like, let's just remove some of those barriers to get stuff done. And like, that's a great idea. But in the end, we decided like, no, we should put these on YouTube as well and like do the video part. And so last summer, I ended up like re-recording some of those audio only episodes and then recording them with video as well. And it was really just kind of like finding my footing and finding my voice. I'd never podcasted before. And it was pretty daunting. It was pretty intimidating, the idea of like having enough to talk about and trusting that I had something of substance to talk about for like 30, 40 minutes every single week. And I felt kind of like a little Bambi, just like finding my feet, with doing that, because it was a new skill for me. So I was working on this project behind the scenes last summer, and I feel like nobody really knew that this was a project I had in the works besides my immediate family. I am a very private person. I feel like I'm really, really slow to open up to people. And like, I feel like you could know me for years and there would still be like so much about me that you don't know. And so I'm the kind of person when like there's something that I really care about, or if I'm working on something that means a lot to me, I like to like hold my cards close for as long as possible before I tell people about it. So yeah, I was like doing all this work behind closed doors, and nobody really knew what was going on. And so this day last year was like when I officially pressed publish on the trailer, when I put out like announcements on social media that the podcast was coming. And so this was the day that people found out, about Yoga Insider. And I definitely had some big fears around hitting publish on my first episode. I had experimented over the years with quite a few different mediums in terms of sharing what I would call thought leadership from the perspective of a yoga teacher trainer, an independent yoga teacher, and someone who's been working in the yoga industry for almost 15 years. And, way back in the day, I actually tried out some self-published blog posts on a website that I don't even have anymore. It was like a different business website of mine. And this was back before I knew anything about, blog posts for boosting SEO or like anything like that. I was just like, I have things to talk about, so I'm going to blog about them. And I remember some of the blog articles were like how to practice yoga at home, or like how to set up a space in your house to practice yoga, like just little, practical things. I also wrote quite a few articles for yoga magazines and online publications. And again, that was just trying out different mediums to kind of see what stuck and how things landed. And yeah, that was always fun. I would actually love to like write more articles when I have time. And then another thing I did, but again, before the podcast kind of came to life, was I experimented with quite a bit of talking head content on Instagram specifically. I've never really been like a TikTok girl. And I think that talking head on Instagram is actually where a lot of my fear of starting a podcast stemmed from. And this is interesting because, like, I'm sure I'll get around to this again at some point. But I feel like starting a podcast has actually been like the solution to some of that fear. So yeah, basically I would share, little like, I don't know, like informational videos about like teaching tips, or I would share like talking videos about my approach to things, or maybe some of the things that like differentiated the way that I teach or the way that I run my classes from other things that were out there. And what would happen quite often when I would post this type of content would be that I would get some negative reactions, and I would get comments or messages from people just like assuming that the content was about them, or just being like, well, this is not how we do it at my studio, or like, I don't know. It was very reactive. It was very much like lacking nuance. And it was pretty much people just wanting to like disagree with what I was saying. And one of the things that was interesting as well was like, it was often people who I barely knew, maybe people I hadn't even met before, but maybe we had like some kind of mutual connection or something. And it was people who had typically like never been to my yoga classes, never been to a training with me. I'd never seen them in a class or a training or at an event. And so these were people who were like not really like in my world, so to speak. And so I think like one of my biggest fears around sharing that type of content, like sharing my thoughts in a podcast format, was that I was going to somehow like be attacked or that I was going to receive hate about, whatever I was saying, that people would like rip apart what I was saying. And, nobody likes being misunderstood. And we also have to recognize that like when we're putting ourselves out on the internet and sharing our thoughts and perspectives on the internet, like we open ourselves up to all sorts of feedback. We open ourselves up to people disagreeing with us or not liking what we say or kind of misconstruing our words. Like all of that comes with the territory. But for some reason, I was just quite nervous that is what was going to happen when I started a yoga podcast, because I had what I would consider to be kind of negative experiences sharing my thoughts on Instagram. Thankfully, like there was something in me that was stronger than those stories that I was telling to myself. And I still went ahead with the podcast, even though I was scared to start it, because I knew that there would be some kind of growth waiting for me on the other side. And I also knew that there was going to be value for my audience. Like I knew that I had valuable things to share and that they were going to land with somebody somewhere out there. I'm not sure if like anybody besides my immediate family knew that I was like nervous to start the podcast, just because like I didn't really tell anybody about the podcast until it was published. But yeah, I made a commitment once I hit publish on that first episode to myself and my audience that I was going to release episodes every single week. And so last summer I started doing that. I started releasing weekly episodes of Yoga Insider. And I just want to say that, even though you see me as the face of Yoga Insider, if you're watching on YouTube, or the voice of Yoga Insider, wherever you're listening, my husband, Kyler, is the producer of the podcast. And it really is like a two-person project. So even though you don't typically see him on the podcast, he was on one episode a long time ago as a guest. Even though you don't see him, like he's a really big part of making the podcast happen every week. And we do work together on it as a team. Now, I really value consistency. I think I value consistency to a fault. And it is in my nature to be very patient and focused and determined, especially when I'm building something. This is something that I learned through running my own pre-registered classes. And I actually had a friend come up to me recently, and I don't think he'd been to a class in probably a month. And he comes up to me after class and he was like, Alex, your classes are so busy right now. And then he said, you've been so patient with growing these classes. And that really stuck with me because I was like, yeah, like I am patient. I am willing to play the long game. And so I think I brought that same mindset with me that I have when it comes to pre-registered classes. I took that same mindset and applied it to the podcast. It was definitely a matter of like keeping my big vision at the forefront when it came to being consistent with producing episodes every single week. And I knew that if I wanted to build something that was going to grow, I had to follow through. I had to follow through on the thing that I said I was going to do, even if I didn't see anything in return. Like that's how so many things work. You have to just keep pushing through. And I knew that there was going to be some kind of value in putting out an episode on the same day at the same time every single week. And so that's what I did. And a lot of it did involve showing up when I didn't want to. It involved showing up on weeks where the inspiration wasn't there. And I was like, man, I feel like I have nothing to talk about. It was about showing up on weeks where like life was so busy or there was other crazy things going on. And it was like, okay, we still have to somehow make time to like set up the podcast, create the podcast, do like the production side on the back end as well, and publish it and get it out there and do it all on time. There's a lot that went into it. And, I think like one of the things that we've been able to do, and this is something that we've just learned as we've gone along this last year, is that we have created a lot of repeatable systems and processes when it comes to the podcast itself and like the sort of back end production. So we have it dialed in at this point to basically however long the podcast itself is. So say I was talking on the podcast for, 40 minutes. That's about how long it takes after the podcast is recorded to get the finished product. So I sit down, I record the actual podcast, and then I hand it over to Kyler, and he does like the tech side on the back end. And so, yeah, just through 1 year of experimenting, I would say that we have gotten a lot better and faster at producing the podcast. And we've also gotten better with video as well, which is really cool. Putting the podcast video on YouTube helped us learn a lot about lighting, about camera work. And then as a result, I've been able to apply some of that to like the content that I'm putting on social media as well over the last year. And yeah, kind of like, put that into practice. And the result is that some of my social media content has gotten better. It's also interesting to kind of see how like different types of content are living in different places for me right now. So in the past, like I would share talking head type content and thought leadership content on Instagram, and I don't share that on Instagram anymore. I found that people were just too reactive. They didn't have any type of nuance or any ability to like see beyond themselves. And those types of people who were like being reactive to my content on Instagram don't seem like the type of people who are sitting down and like consuming long form content. So it's actually been a really positive thing for me to keep my long form content separate. And like, if you want to hear me yap for a long time, you can listen to my podcast like you are right now. And then if you want just like really short informational content or like just pretty visuals, like you can find those on Instagram. And I feel like that has been like a really nice, harmonious shift for me that's kind of happened organically. And that's really cool. I feel like I found kind of a happy place. And the other thing is like, a lot of the fears that I had about starting a podcast going into this, like, I don't think any of those fears actually came true. All of the feedback that has made its way back to me about Yoga Insider has been overwhelmingly positive. It's been very positive. And, on the other side of doing something that initially felt really uncomfortable and is still sometimes uncomfortable to an extent, it has shown me that a lot of times our fears are in our minds, and it is possible for things to turn out much better than you expected. It's also really nice to see like kind of like this tangible body of work emerge slowly over time, and to see certain themes in the podcast pop up again and again. Like that's just really interesting. It's kind of like its own entity. And that's been kind of cool to see that build up over the last year. And what I hope as well is that Yoga Insider podcast has been a way for my audience to know a little bit more about me and my thoughts, because again, I've said before, like I'm incredibly private. I'm very, very slow to open up to people. And I know that, I definitely don't overshare by any means. I feel like that's never going to happen. But I just hope that, the podcast is a way for you to know me, like, and my personality just a little bit more than you would be able to get like from social media, for example. And I'm also confident that there is some educational or inspirational value in some of the episodes. And I trust that, they're getting out there to the people that need to hear them. To know that yoga teachers in 53 different countries are listening to Yoga Insider is so fun to me. And part of this process has been to trust what I'm putting out into the world and just know that like it's going to land where it needs to land. And this kind of feels like going back to the teaching of taking action for action's sake and trusting that your action is part of your greater purpose while releasing the fruits of your actions. So not getting overly attached to the outcome or like what comes from it. And so having a podcast has been a really great opportunity to put that into practice in such a real way, because with this type of media, with this kind of long form content, you're not necessarily getting anything back from people. Like, yes, I get messages from people. I get emails. I get DMs about the podcast. Once in a while, I get a comment on YouTube or Spotify. I love seeing those. But at the end of the day, you're like putting things out into the ether and hoping that they stick. It's not the same as like, sitting in a room with a bunch of yoga teachers and being able to have conversation back and forth. It feels a little bit one-sided. And again, that's just like the nature of podcasting and something that you have to get used to. I think that a lot of yoga teachers struggle with being seen. Like, this is a conversation I've had with so many yoga teachers. A lot of us, downplay as well what we have to offer. And I think part of this is because so many yoga teachers are women, and a lot of this is societal. It's systemic. It's not unique to the yoga industry, but it's noticeable here because so many yoga teachers are women. And throughout our lives, we've been taught to, be humble, not to brag, like don't do anything to make people uncomfortable. Don't take up too much space. You should smile. You should be friendly. You should be liked by everyone. And then when it comes to taking some of those necessary steps towards our growth, especially some of those steps which require, being more visible and like putting yourself out there in front of people, it's also so easy to get caught up with the details and like let certain things get in the way. And I could have definitely wasted time, for example, like fixating on how weird I look when I'm talking to the camera. Like that's one of those things where for most of us, like we're not used to seeing ourselves talk on camera, or we're not used to seeing ourselves on video, and then we see it back and we're like, oh, I look so weird, or I do this weird thing with my face or my hands or whatever, right? And like even those kinds of things could be enough to like stop us from putting something out there. I could have fixated on like little mistakes that I make literally every single time I'm talking. Like I always fumble over my words or take a little bit longer than you would expect to get my words out or whatever. Like there's so many things that we could use as excuses not to put our work out there, or not to just go ahead with the things that we want to do. And I feel like I see way too many talented and creative people, not just in the yoga industry, but like all over the place, being held back by their own perfectionism. And so something that I've learned through having the podcast and putting in an episode every week is that the only way to create momentum in any sort of project is to make it. Like make your project. Trust that your project is a snapshot of a moment in time, and then carry on. You can't control the way that other people will interpret or make meaning of your art or your ideas. And that mindset has been really like instrumental for me in being able to not get caught up on things, like just put things out there and then carry on and move on to the next. And I do think, like when I reflect on it, that podcasting has made me a better yoga teacher. I feel more confident in my ability to respond to things on the spot, as well as my ability to explain things on the spot without preparation. Like I feel like I have kind of worked that part of my brain through podcasting every week. And I do believe that podcasting is a form of public speaking, which is something that a lot of people are scared of. And so the way that I see it is that it's kind of like a muscle that you have to train. If you show up consistently, even if you're not in the mood, even if you don't have like the most energy to give on, whatever given day, little by little, you're going to improve. You're going to get stronger. It's just like building a muscle in the gym. Like it's often a really slow progress. You might even not think that you're making progress at all. But then when you look back over time, you can see that you have grown. And it's really cool to be in this place like a year later, a year of podcasting later, where, I was so fearful last summer about just putting myself out there in this way, sharing my thoughts in this way. It's cool to look back and be like, okay, first of all of those things that you were afraid of, like most of them weren't true, or even if they were, it doesn't matter. It's cool to look back and be like, wow, like I've learned new skills. I've gotten better at something. I'm better at speaking now. I'm more comfortable on camera now. I've learned like how to use a camera. I've learned like new technology and I'm going to keep learning and keep refining and evolving as I go. And that's a good feeling. Like it's good to be a beginner at something. It's good to be bad at something too. And I think especially like as somebody who's been a yoga teacher for my entire adult life, I know that I'm proficient in certain aspects of teaching. I think it's good to like be humble and kind of stay on your toes as well, and just always be learning and always stay teachable. And this has been like part of my practice this last year. Just learning something new, doing it in front of people, even if I'm not good at it. So I want to leave you with like a few of my key takeaways, key lessons from a full year of podcasting every week. And the first thing I want to share is that consistency beats perfection. So just broadly speaking, you don't need every episode or every like project that you put out into the world to be flawless. And I don't think that there's any point in fixating on every little thing that went wrong or like every little detail that you don't love. Like, you are doing such a disservice to yourself by fixating on those little things. You need to just make a really quick note of like what you want to improve, what you want to refine, and then carry on and keep moving forward. And I just feel like there's like so many things, especially creatively, that you can apply that wisdom to. So that is such a big one for me. Consistency beats perfection. Another that I want to share is that your fears are not usually predictions. So a lot of the things that we worry about never actually end up happening. And in my experience, often the reality and the potential for growth on the other side of fear is like far better than we could have ever imagined. And the only way we're going to know like what's on the other side of that thing that we're afraid of, or all of those stories that we're making up in our minds, is by doing the thing that we're afraid of, even if we don't feel ready to do it, even if we feel like we don't know what we're doing, even if we feel like it's not perfect. Like, you can't let those things hold you back, because there's just like so much goodness on the other side. You also should remember that you can't control how people interpret your work. You can only control whether or not you create it, whether or not you put it out there. You need to release the need for approval and universal understanding, which I know is so hard to do. Like, we're trained to want to be likable and you've got to find a way to like let some of that go and trust your higher vision. Like, trust that your higher vision for whatever you're working on is more important than your need to be liked. I also think that every creative project is going to teach you something beyond the project itself. So there's always lessons there that are going to kind of present themselves to us. And I think that starting a podcast highlighted some of my fears and some of the old stories that I'd been carrying around with me. And you know, it made me aware of them. It helped me kind of move through some of them, move past some of them. And it also made me a better speaker, a better communicator, a better yoga teacher. It made me more comfortable on camera. And I feel like those are, you know, really, really important skills. Now, a quote that I'll share from Kyler, because I was chatting with him briefly before I recorded this podcast, like earlier today, and asking him a little bit about like his reflections on, you know, producing the podcast for the last year. And his quote was that perfectionism is procrastination. Perfectionism is procrastination. And so this is just like a reminder that your finished work is what makes an impact. And that if you can just do the things you want to do the things you say you're going to do, and take imperfect action towards those things, like that is what's going to leave an impression. It's not just like writing things down in your notebook and closing the notebook and throwing it in a drawer, or talking about doing something but never actually doing it. Like, just do the thing, do it imperfectly. I feel like so many people, especially yoga teachers, are held back by perfection, and like to the point that it's debilitating, that it completely stops them from taking action altogether. And it is so liberating to put things out there that are imperfect. And I have actually loved doing that this last year. Okay, so Kyler wanted to make sure that I shared his quote with you. Perfectionism is procrastination. And then my last one that I'll leave you with is to trust that your work will reach the people that it's meant to reach. So I think with anything, like, we don't always get immediate feedback, but your work is going to have a way of finding the people who need it the most. And I'm so grateful for like every message, every comment, every email, like even though, there aren't tons of them, it means so much to me to know that there are real people listening to the podcast and finding even just like the littlest bit of inspiration on the other side. And like, even though I can see statistics for the podcast and I can see like all of the countries and cities that people are listening in, like, I don't know who is actually listening to the podcast unless you tell me. And every time somebody comes up to me and they're like, they start talking about an episode, or they're like, oh, I've been listening to your podcast and I love it. Like, that is so exciting to me, just because I can like imagine that person sitting there listening to it, and I feel connected. Like, I feel like I'm actually talking to that person. So I love knowing who you are, even though like so many of my listeners are anonymous. That's fine. But if you would like to reveal yourselves to me, like, I love knowing who's listening to the podcast. So yeah, I will leave you with that. And I'll just say that, like, if there's something that you've been thinking about creating, so maybe it's a podcast, maybe it is a business, a project that you want to start, like in your home, like a home renovation, an art project, maybe you want to write a book. I hope that this episode reminds you that you don't have to feel like free of fear to begin. You don't have to have everything all figured out to begin. Just like take action towards the thing that you want to do and be willing to take that first step. I feel like none of this would have happened if I had waited till I felt completely ready. Like, today Yoga Insider has listeners in 53 countries. That's so crazy to me. And I feel like this is just proof that like you need to go do the thing that you feel like doing, even if you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So wherever you are listening from, I hope that you trust yourself enough to start the thing that you want to start, that thing that's been in the back of your mind or that you've been like talking about starting, but you haven't done. I feel like there's so much goodness on the other side of that. And I really, really just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here for a whole year and for listening and engaging to Yoga Insider podcast. Whether you have listened to like 2 minutes of one episode or you listen every single week, I'm just so, so glad you're here. And I will see you next time. Thank you.